Hey everyone, welcome to 1 Cent Sports Cards YouTube channel. Today I'm excited to be announcing a new video series that I will be doing on my channel called the 1 Cent Card Investing Series. And this is a series of videos where I will be giving collecting advice for the everyday hobbyist. So this will not be advice that tells you to go out and buy the latest Zion Williamson PSA 10 card. Not be advice that tells you go out and buy a Mike Trout rookie card PSA 10. This is for the everyday hobbyist. Cards that, if you are into the hobby, that are affordable to an extent, I guess, that are a little less obscure, but cards that I think that if you invest in them now, that you are looking to maybe flip later, in the short term, in the long term, that you make a little bit more of a sound decision on your investments. And all of this advice will be backed by numbers, by trends. It will not just be opinions of mine of who I think is going to be going up. I feel like a lot of people give a lot of those opinions, but you got to base your opinions in a little bit of fact. So we won't just be covering off on graded cards. I'm going to cover off on raw cards. I'm going to cover off on all sorts of different cards. I'm going to cover off on cards that maybe are only worth $1 or $2 now. I will cover off on some cards that are worth more. Today, we will be talking about PSA cards, but you'll see why in a moment. And so I hope that if you are watching the channel for the first time, that you will go ahead and throw over to first and give me a like on my video. And if you're not subscribed, now is the time to subscribe, because these videos will be coming out regularly, and they will be based in actual numbers that are happening in real time. And you will see what I mean by that in just a minute. So go ahead and hit that notification button if you can, so when these videos come out, you get the latest investment and advice from 1 Cent Sports Cards. So you guys, this week, what I am going to cover off on is the Topps 2020 Series 1 Big Four rookies. And what we'll do is we will get right into it. So the question becomes, we have 4 big rookies. Obviously, Gavin Lux, Bichette Yordan Alvarez, and Aristides Aquino. And all 4 of them recently had their PSA cards start hitting the market. So because of everything with the pandemic, this set came out in March, but with the pandemic and the slowdown with PSA, these cards have only really started hitting eBay and the secondary market in the last, call it, it's really 5 weeks, but it's been about 4 weeks. And there has not actually been a ton of sales on them yet, because there's not a lot of them out there yet. There's a ton of people that are still waiting for their cards to show up so they can flip them. So the question is now, being that we know that the market isn't totally flooded with them, what does that do to the market? Out of these 4 rookies, which one is the most sound investment to make right now? Now, if baseball season starts, all of this could change overnight. That's what happens in the hobby. So with speculating, this is really probably talking, yes, long-term investment, but where we're going with this is, what is the one that in the next couple weeks, next couple months, where these cards, I think, where some of these cards may continue a downward trend or an upward trend, but which one is going to be the biggest payoff? So let's get right into the numbers. So here we go. When we look at PSA sales over on eBay, you can see on this chart that really the very first card out of all 4 of these sold way back on April 27th, which you say, well, wait a minute, that was like a month, that was almost 2 months after the set got released. And you're absolutely right. It takes a long time for PSA to do everything. And with the shutdown, it slowed everything down even more. So these cards are just now hitting. So Gavin Lux's first card, and you'll see here on the graph, Gavin Lux's first card actually sold way back on April 27th for around $150. And then what you see, which is very common with a lot of sets. This is not unique to just Topps. A lot of sets, you get these cards that first come out, and there's that what I like to call set burn, which is the new set comes out, everyone's very excited, it inflates all the prices. Then other sets start coming out. People start looking for new stuff, and the hype and the demand for the older set, in this case Topps Series 1, dies off a little bit. So you see a crash, if you will, on a lot of the prices. So a lot of people, and this is nothing that anyone that's ever invested in cards doesn't know. So there's that crash that happens. So what we have lined up here, our green line is going to be Gavin Lux. Then we've got Yordan Alvarez as the orange line. We've got Bichette as the blue, and then Aquino as the red. Now, what you'll notice with Aquino is there has been very little sales of his. And why that is, not exactly sure. He's probably, when you talk about the big four rookies, most people will put him at fourth, and there's people that maybe don't even put him in the top four. However, I believe that he is definitely one of the top four this year. So that's why I have him included in here. So when I look at this, here's what we notice. Let's take Gavin Lux, since he was the first card that sold. So what we notice is we had a card that went all the way back on April 27th for like $150. Then we dropped all the way down to like $50 or $55 a little bit after May 18th. So around like May 18th to May 20th. And then so that's that crash that I was talking about. And then we see a little bit of a rebound where he goes all the way back up to around 115 or so on May 21st, which, by the way, that's only about 2 weeks ago right now. And as late as June 1st, which is just like 2 days ago, he is now hovering right back around that $110 range. So this is for a PSA 10 base Gavin Lux. Then as we look at Yordan Alvarez, Yordan Alvarez has a little bit of an interesting line here. So very quickly after the first Gavin Lux, you see Yordan. And Yordan started out with a little bit more of a, what I will call a softer crash. And so you'll see here, he kind of started out right there, you know, at around 125, but then he had a bump that went all the way up to 150. And then that's when his crash came in. His lowest priced PSA 10 actually just happened on like May 27th, or not May 27th, but May 25th. And it was all the way down at $40. Now, that happens every once in a while as we look at this line, and we're going to look at trend lines here in a minute. But as we look at this lines, I would say that this $150, little bit of an anomaly, and the $40, obviously, a little bit of an anomaly as well. And when we look at trend lines here, you'll kind of see what I'm talking about. And then we go over to Mr. Bichette. Now, Bichette is probably, as speculators go, the hottest rookie out of all four of these in regards to what his card prices have done since his rookie cards started coming out. So what you'll see there, sometime around May 8th, his first card kind of came in right at around 115 or so. And then it took a steady climb throughout the month of May, and it got all the way up to around this $150 range and stayed there. However, in the last week or so, we've come all the way back down to around 100, and it is Gavin Lux that actually sits at the highest priced PSA 10 out of all four rookies for 2020 at the moment. Now, obviously, these lines fluctuate day to day, and there are now plenty of cards hitting the market compared to where we were at sometime in the beginning of May and April. So as you can see, we've got more and more cards. These lines start filling up a little bit more, so more and more cards are starting to hit the market. And so we have to account for that when we think about which one of these four do we want to invest in. Now let's hit on Aquino real quick. What you see with him, there's actually, as of I'm recording this on the night of June 2nd, there are actually only 3 PSA 10 Aquino cards that have sold on eBay. I know that sounds insane. There's plenty of like BGS cards and all of those, but we are only including the PSA cards in these. And all of this is from TerraSpeak. That is where I pulled all this data. So I have an eBay store. I can pull all of this data. It's very easy for me to pull. So that is where all this data comes from. So as you'll notice, we didn't get one of his until about 2 weeks ago, and he has been hovering between, we're going to call it that $78 range up to $100. Now, he is not seeing the crash that we see in a lot of these other cards outside of Bichette. His cards have actually gone up. Now, will that last? We're going to cover off on that in just a minute. So let's switch over to the trend lines. Now, this may seem a little bit more hard to view on screen, but as we look at trend lines, what we're looking for is which ones are going up and which ones are going down. Now, because of the actual shortage of PSA 10s that have sold on eBay, these can actually be a little bit deceiving, and I'm going to cover off on that why in a minute. But let's go ahead and take a look. We have two rookies that actually have positive trend lines right now. Obviously, we see way up here, Bichette. Bichette's trend line from April 27th right into the beginning of June is steadily increased this entire time. However, when you look at his latest sales, starting way back on, well, not way back, but we'll call it, May 23rd right here, going all the way into June 1st. So that's about 10 days. His prices are starting to fall a little bit. But the trend line, based upon where he started selling, which was like May 8th, from May 8th all the way up into June 1st, so about 3 weeks, we see a slight positive trend line. Aquino, this one is a little bit skewed because we only have limited data on this, but Aquino's cards apparently are skyrocketing, but buyer beware on that because there's not enough data that actually says that his cards are going to remain that way. And as we look at these other three lines, there's a lot of things that we can find that are similar that we may start seeing with the Aquino card as time progresses over the next couple weeks. And then we have Alvarez, who started out, around that $125 range, went all the way up to like $150, then crashed all the way down to $40. We see his trend line actually is the worst out of all four. And what we also see is that from about March 25th down into June 1st, that his cards have actually, off that $40 anomaly, have been selling anywhere between $70 and just below $80, which is probably, but we have seen a steady increase and we've seen more and more people buying them. So you can see this trend line right here at the end be a little bit more positive in the last week. Now, here's what's interesting. What we see out of almost every card. So we have Gavin Lux, who came down, had a significant crash, and Gavin Lux has kind of seesawed back up here a little bit. His trend line, not bad at all. It does have a downward trend, but that is that burn. That's what I'm going to call that set burn that you're going to see in a lot of new sets. So what you're looking for is that set burn to burn off, and then that card price to kind of level out and the market to kind of start dictating a price. Then you look for those trend lines. So with Lux, you kind of see here, he had the crash and he's kind of gone back up. His crash very much happened right around the middle of May. Yordan Alvarez, and it's interesting, about a week later, and if you look at when cards started selling on eBay, Gavin Lux was the first. His card was the first to crash. Yordan Alvarez was the second card to go on eBay. His card was the second card to have that set burn crash. Then we look at Bichette, maybe a little bit of an anomaly, but we're about a week after the Yordan Alvarez crash, and look at the trend line on Bichette right now. You see his cards have kind of crashed a little bit. Now, his crash may not be as hard. He may have a little bit more of a soft landing. And then we see, almost 2 weeks later when the Aquino cards start hitting, we see a little bit of an upward trend. And I would venture to say that we will see a little bit of a crash there. But because the set has burned off and people have turned their attention to Bowman, and there's a lot of other new sets that are on the horizon, that crash may not be as big as it was for Yordan Alvarez and for Gavin Lux. So the question still remains, after we look at all of this data, what is the card that I would recommend that you invest in based upon where prices are right now? Like I said, this would be kind of a real-time investment advice. I would not follow this advice if you're watching this in August 2020 or September 2020. I recorded this in early June. This is an early June take. This is not something that I would take much later on. But based upon all the trends that we see right now, one, I would say that any of these cards long-term are probably a sound investment based upon their talent, the talent that these players have. However, do I think that if one of these players drops off and maybe goes on to be a solid player, but maybe only a all-star every once in a while, obviously these prices would drop. But so you have to take that into account. But in the short term, with baseball right around the corner, if everything opens up the way that they think that they may be able to get it opened up, there may be an opportunity here for some of these cards to kind of be a little bit of a bargain price right now. So with all that being said, my investment pick is the Yordan Alvarez, and I'm going to tell you why. The Yordan Alvarez, right now, based upon those trend lines we were just looking at, the card is currently selling for lower than all the other three rookies, and it isn't even close. They're about $75 they can be had over on eBay for a PSA 10. And Yordan, and interestingly enough, going into the card collecting season, Yordan was the most hyped player. His cards were thought to be the most expensive. So his card has come crashing down. Now, we're talking PSA 10s here. So when we look at that historical pricing, it shows potential. So what I mean by that is, hey, way back when the card season started, these cards were going for as high as 150, almost 160. They started out at 120. They're all the way down to $70 right now, and like between 70 and 80 bucks. But as you can see, there are plenty of people when the hype first started on this that are willing to pay for that card at a much higher price than the $70 to $80 price that you could pay now. The other thing is we looked at all those trend lines and the buying patterns. We see that post-release crash has already bottomed out. Yordan Alvarez's cards for about the last 10 days, there was that one that went all the way down to 40 and then it kind of inched back up to 60. Now we're back up to 70, 75, and that was as of June 1st. So if you're watching this on June 3rd, those prices have not fluctuated so much that you can probably still get a PSA 10 Yordan Alvarez for somewhere between $70 and $80 right now. And you would know that post-release crash has kind of already happened with this card. We saw that with the Gavin Lux. Gavin Lux is starting to go back up. Lux, that card seems a little bit too high for, it's still a great investment, I actually think, but that card has rebounded a little bit more than Yordan Alvarez. And then maybe the most obvious reason is, we're talking about the 2019 Rookie of the Year. He had a fantastic season last year. And he's the one guy in the Astros that I do not believe is going to have any of the trash can stuff associated with his name as much as some of these other players. He was a fantastic prospect in the minors. He came out. He won the Rookie of the Year award. He is a great player. He played for most of the 2020 season. He was able to hit big league pitching. I think he's got the least... he's got a very minimal potential for a sophomore slump. And if he comes out of those gates fast in a shortened season with the fervor and all the speculation that has gone on in the card in the card hobby, I can tell you right now that these cards are sitting at $75 right now. If Yordan comes out and starts having a fantastic season out of the blocks, has a fast first month or something like that, these cards are going to skyrocket almost immediately. So a short-term investment, I think, is a great investment. And hedging your bets. Let's say he comes out slow because of the strike, or the strike shortened, the pandemic shortened season. Let's say he comes out slow. Well, he's still a fantastic player. And let's say he goes into 2021 and has a great all-star season. And keep in mind of how young he is and everything. A long-term investment, I think it's even less risk. He's a very good player. And that's where I go to. He's a low risk, high reward option. So short term, I think you can get him at a bargain right now. And then you may very much, if he comes out of those gates really quick, you could turn these cards really fast. You could, and you haven't invested a ton of money. It's less than $100. And then even if he comes out slow, keep in mind the talent that Yordan Alvarez has. And I do think that even as a long-term investment, the fact that you could get these for $70, it is the Topps flagship. This is his base. Now, when you look at all the parallels are going for obviously a couple $100 in PSA 10. A few of them have sold on there. There was actually a Gavin Lux that sold for $16,000. The black, I cannot believe it sold for that much. But as I look at these cards, the Yordan Alvarez would be my pick. My second pick, just so you know, if I was to rank these in order, my second, third, and fourth pick, I would probably put the Gavin Lux as 2, and I would put Bichette as a 3. I think Bichette is a little overrated as I look at his numbers overall of what he did last year. He did come out hot, but then he was not that great. I don't know that he's quite ready. The Blue Jays obviously are going to call him up because they've got nothing to lose. They're in rebuilding mode. They have a nucleus of young stars that could produce a great team in the near future. But I still think they're a year or two away from being a great team, and they compete in the AL East, which does not help them at all. With the Yankees being stacked like they are. So I think the Bichette, I think he's got a lot of potential to come out of the block slow. I think he's got a lot of potential to come back down to earth. His cards are the ones that did not crash as much. I think there's a lot of speculation around him. And then there's Aquino, which I might actually put above Bichette even, but I think it's close. Aquino, I still think is young. He is on a very talented Reds team that is a sleeper team that could do a lot of damage. Watch out for the Reds if this season gets started. And Aquino could be one of those guys that a lot of people are overlooking because he's not the top 3 big name. He's more top 4, maybe top 5. But I don't have enough data on him to really say, hey, has his crash happened yet? And so with him, it's kind of a wait and see approach. If you're a Reds fan, I think it's not a bad buy at all. But if you are a pure speculator and investor, that is one that I maybe say wait before you buy in. But if you already have them, definitely hold. So that, guys, is my first episode of my card investing series, the 1 cent card investing series. I hope you guys liked it. Comment below. Let me know what you think would be great cards for me to review and let you know if they would be good investments for future episodes. Comment below. Let me know which one of the big 4 rookies you think you would invest in right now and why. And like I said, if you haven't done so already, now is the time to subscribe to the channel. Hit that bell so you get notified with the latest investment advice. And with that, guys, I am going to sign off. I hope you enjoyed this video. And until next time, good luck on all your pack rips. We will talk to you soon.